It will not surprise you to hear me say that Shohei Ohtani is a top pitcher on tonight's slate for daily fantasy baseball because he is tremendous. He is at home. He's in a good matchup. He checks every box. The thing that I see with this slate is if I'm not spending on Ohtani, I want to get a lower salaried pitcher in there in order to make my rosters very different from the ones with Ohtani, to give myself a different path to a big point total than the Ohtani lineups. And I think the good thing about tonight's slate is we actually have some guys with salaries $2,000 lower than Ohtani's with very good upside. We're going to break down who those guys are, why I love Ohtani to begin with, and what you should do with tonight's slate for daily fantasy baseball. Welcome on into the solo shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sanas. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire, here to break down Friday's 12-game main slate with lock set for 7:05 p.m. Eastern for today. Weather notes on this slate: there is a good chance of rain in Cleveland for the Marlins and the Guardians. That could put the game at risk. I think they'll be able to play, but it's worth noting that that game is in danger. Temperature just 52 degrees. So if that game does play, I would downgrade batters there. There is no rain in Minneapolis for the Twins Nationals. If it were to precipitate, it might be snow because it's just 38 degrees there. That's a pretty big downgrade for batters. So I think they'll play it despite the fact it's very chilly, but just 38 degrees there. Keep that in mind for your lineups, and a big downgrade to batters, upgrade to pitchers in that game. And again, check back on the Guardians and Marlins later on to make sure they'll be able to play that one. We'll dive into the pitchers, Ohtani, the rest of the crowd in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. MLB DFS podcast every weekday, in addition to PGA every week, UFC for select events, all right here in the same feed. So go search for the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. Hit subscribe, and if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well. The NBA playoffs are here, and you can get into the action right from first tip with FanDuel. Right now, all customers can get a no-sweat same-game parlay every weekend when you bet the NBA playoffs. That's right. Just place a 3+ leg same game parlay or a same game parlay plus on any NBA playoff game, and you'll get bonus bets back if you don't win. There's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Head to the FanDuel app and get a no-sweat same game parlay every weekend of the NBA playoffs. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. In Massachusetts, hope is here. GamblingHelplineMA.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support. In New York, 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342. In Connecticut, 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. In Wyoming and Kansas, 1-800-522-4700 or in Kansas, ksgamblinghelp.com. Louisiana is 1-877-770-STOP. In Maryland, mdgamblinghelp.org. And in West Virginia, go to 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Pitching preview for this Friday main slate. No shocker here. Shohei Ohtani comes in with the highest salary on FanDuel. He is $11,400, followed by Anthony DeSclafani at $10,600. We got Freddie Peralta at $10,400 and Zach Gallen at $10,000. Seth Lugo is $98,000. Bryce Elder comes in at $96,000 with Aaron Nola at $93,000. Hunter Brown is $91,000 with Tyler Mahle at $9,000 flat. John Gray, Domingo Herman, George Kirby, Yusei Kikuchi, Tyler Wells, and Nick Pivetta are the others at $8,000 or higher. So you hear a lot of names there and a lot of guys, and they have higher salaries than you may think, which is part of why I want to commit to Ohtani as my top option for tonight. And I love a slate, frankly, where I can just gush over Ohtani and make him my top guy without thought. This is very much one of those. Ohtani's facing the Royals. That's a big part of the equation here. They have an 83 WRC plus against righties with a 133 ISO, a 23% strikeout rate, and minimal walks. That is a tremendous matchup for a righty across the board. And Ohtani's had some good matchups this year for sure, but he's taken full advantage of them. He has a 0.86 ERA. That is a 0 as the first digit there. 0.86 ERA, 33% strikeout rate, 2.56 expected ERA. The one issue he has been walks. But again, the Royals do not draw those. If you want to expand the sample, Ohtani has still been dominant over a larger span. He's been throwing more sliders across his past 16 starts, and he leads the slate with a 30% strikeout rate in that sample. His hard hit rate is 29%, which is also the top number on the slate. So what you get here is the best pitcher on the slate in a great matchup at home. I have Ohtani projected for 7.3 strikeouts, and that's enough for me to feel great about his outlook here. So Shohei Ohtani, to me, is the number one guy on this slate. As mentioned, if I'm not using Ohtani, I want to have a different roster construction than the Ohtani lineups. I want to save some salary. And one way to do so is via Aaron Nola, who has not had as good of a year as Ohtani has. His velocity is down. The strikeouts have gone down too, which does make it easier to make Ohtani ranked higher. But I still have some interest in Nola here, and he will be our number 2 guy. Across 4 starts this year, Nola's strikeout rate is just 20%. He has a 5.91 ERA. And it makes sense because he is one of the guys who we flagged coming into this year who could have a tough time adjusting to the pitch clock because he had a super long pace. Makes sense he'd have a tougher time adjusting to that than others. But Nola's still a good pitcher, and it seems like things are trending up for him. Nola's swinging strike rate has increased every single game so far this year. It went from 6.9% in his first start to 13.3% last time out. He's also made 3 of his 4 starts on the road, and Nola has at times had pretty drastic home road splits. He's at home tonight. He's also in a plus matchup. He gets the Rockies here, who have an 88 WRC plus against righties with a 22% strikeout rate and a low walk rate. Even with decreased velocity, Nola's expected ERA this year is 3.62. So he should improve regardless, and he gets conditions with a plus conditions with a plus matchup at home. So I'm not totally convinced he'll turn things around because the velocity is pretty low, but there is enough here to make Nola viable. And I'm comfortable putting Nola second on my list, in large part because the salary is so down from expectation for a typical Aaron Nola. So might not happen, might not turn things around, but we get a discounted salary. He's trending up. He's at home in a good matchup. I think that's enough to make Aaron Nola the number 2 pitcher on the main slate for tonight. We also get a bit of a gift with our value play in terms of salaries here, because right behind Nola is Tyler Mahle. He is right there at 9,000, which makes him count as our value play, and he's pitching at well. He's pitching well. He's at home. He's in cold weather. He's facing the Nationals. I think that makes Mahle pretty obvious as our top value option of the slate. The Nationals are definitely a good spot for righties. 84 WRC plus on the current active roster since the start of last year. 129 ISO. Not a big strikeout team, roughly league average there, but they draw no walks. Literally none. 5.8%. Very low number. As a result of that, starting pitchers are super efficient against them. Pitchers average just 3.65 pitches per plate appearance against the Royals, which means guys can go deeper in games on shorter pitch counts. That could be a boost for Mahle. His max pitch count so far this year is 91. He left after 90 last time out, but that was more due to effectiveness than pitch count, which means he could get up to 95, 97 or so in this spot potentially. It's also a much easier matchup for Mahle because he's faced the Astros and the Yankees his past 2 starts. And despite that, he still has a 28% strikeout rate so far this year. He's getting more ground balls as well. We're seeing Mahle throw a slider now. It was a cutter last year, slightly different pitch to be a slider now. So some changes for him were expected, and it seems like the results have been positive. I have Mahle projected for 6.3 strikeouts here. I think that's enough where we should feel good about Mahle as our top value at $9,000. We'll talk about one more lower salary guy and things to watch, who I think is very much in play. But to me, Mahle is the preference. So if I'm not going Ohtani, I want to save salary, and I can do so via Nola at 93 and via Mahle at 9,000. Let's go back here to that Nola game and talk about our top stack of the night. That's the Philadelphia Phillies. And their offense is diminished from what it used to be. No Bryce Harper, no Rhys Hoskins. So that's a bummer. But they still have guys with upside. And I think they could flash that upside here tonight. They're facing Noah Davis, who threw 5 shutout innings in his first start, but in that game, he had a 5.3% swinging strike rate, which is in line with expectations from the minors. We saw him make 3 AAA starts earlier on this year, and his swinging strike rate there was 6.3%. So Davis will be a low strikeout pitcher, which means he needs elite batted ball data to truly get by. Not sure if he'll have that personally. He made 26 starts in a one stop in the minors last year. His fly ball right there was 46% with a 5.54 ERA and a 4.68 xFIP. So it's hard to have high expectations when those are the numbers in the minors. So the Phillies have their issues. They have their flaws for sure as an offense, but I think that they can get to him here. And with the upside individuals they have, we can feel good about them. So the Phillies, to me, grayed out as a quality stack. Obviously, the upside guys, Trey Turner, Kyle Schwarber. I think Brandon Marsh is showing a lot of that right now as well. And I do think that JT Realmuto still has that too, despite his slow start to this year. He has a 32% strikeout rate, which is rough. His expected WOBA is 310, also rough. But he's had more hard contact recently. His barrel rate is 11.6%, actually a hair higher than what it was last year. He is willing to steal some bases. So obviously, other guys here have more upside than Realmuto, but he also comes with a low salary, 29. So if you want to get Ohtani with the Phillies, Realmuto, I think, is a key point within that. So I would not underestimate Realmuto's upside despite his slow start. And I want him in my Philly stacks, especially if I'm going Ohtani and need to save some salary. Speaking of Ohtani, let's talk about his offense too. They're facing the Royals, and the Royals are using an opener today before Ryan Yarbrough. Yarbrough will be the long boy, which means they'll delay Yarbrough being out there against this lineup, which is probably a good thing because he's a lefty, and the Angels can obliterate lefties. I'm not sure it'll be enough to keep this offense in check, though. Yarbrough does a good job of suppressing hard contact, but the rest of his profile is pretty rough, and it negates the good in the contact suppression. Last year, in a similar role to what he's expected to have tonight, Yarbrough had a 4.40 expected ERA. He hasn't looked great to open this year in a shorter role. It's a very small sample, so I don't want to put a lot of stock in that. But if we just take last year's version of Yarbrough and put him in this matchup against the Angels, he'd probably struggle. Plus, the Royals bullpen, even if Yarbrough, because I've got him projected for like 60 or so pitches, the bullpen beyond him is pretty poor. They have the second worst active roster skill interactive ERA since the start of last year. And I think that all adds up to making the Angels a quality stack here, even with the opener being in play. So the Angels, to me, grade out well for stacking for tonight. And, you can't use Ohtani for the stack, which is a bummer, but totally fine by me regardless. I do think this is a good buy low spot for Brandon Drury, who has been brutal so far this year. A lot of strikeouts. His barrel rate is down. That's pushed his salary down to $24. And he may continue to struggle because you look at the past week or so, things have not gotten better. He's not trending up, but it's a very low salary for a guy who we know can crush lefties, and he's in a plus matchup. So I'm fine giving Drury a shot here, despite the fact that the more recent data for him is not super encouraging. Typically, I do want to see some signs of life, some hard hit balls and stuff like that. You're not getting that here with Drury, but I think there's enough in the tank still to feel good about him. So concerns for sure, but still a guy I want to turn to for tonight. Our third stack, we're going to head to Milwaukee. I hope they close the roof at American Family Field or whatever it's called now, because it's 53 degrees in Milwaukee. And if they close the roof, that would make it a better park factor for tonight. So check back on that. If they decide to keep the roof open, it would be a slight downgrade. I think they might, but regardless, the Brewers are in play. Facing Nick Pivetta here, really struggling with hard contact to open this year. And across 3 starts, Pivetta, you don't want to overreact because it is a very small sample, but it's really bad. 59% hard hit rate allowed, 53% fly ball rate. Numbers 10 percentage points lower in both those categories would still be rough. 59-53 is bad. And it leads to a 6.03 expected ERA. Last year, Pivetta had troubles with hard contact too, with a 45% hard hit rate allowed. He was able to navigate around it because he got enough strikeouts, but it's a very risky route. We can get blowups against him in certain situations. Now, the Brewers will strike out. They have plenty of guys who will do that, so there is some risk in here, but they can put balls in the seats. So it's a power matchup against a guy who lets a lot of high hard contact. So the Brewers to me are a good tournament stack as a result in this spot. Lefties have had the upper hand on Pivetta the past couple of years, which is great for Rowdy Tellez, obviously. Christian Yelich has a 56% hard hit rate so far this year, and he can steal bases. So he needs to loft the ball to hit more power, but with the increased prevalence of the running game, I think that Yelich still grades out well for DFS because of the stolen bases and because he's at least hitting the ball pretty hard. I'm not as fond of Jesse Winker personally due to the lack of running. If he were to run a bit, maybe I could get there, but I think that it does give a boost to Tellez and Yelich for sure. Very high on them. And then we can get to the righties after that. Things to watch. Let's go back to the pitching discussion and talk about one more value guy worth considering. That to me is Domingo Germán. He pitched great last time out, 11 strikeouts there. He did have to wash some sticky stuff off his hands, so hopefully he doesn't get Scherzer'd here, but and maybe he comes back to earth if the sticky stuff is not there. But 8 strikeouts in his first start this year too, which means that Germán has upside. Now he's facing the Jays, which is a tough spot, which is why I prefer Malley, but Germán is at least in play. So between Nola, Malley, and Germán, you have routes to being different from Ohtani lineups. If you don't go Ohtani, I think that's a good thing for tonight. Sticking to that same game, I think the Yankees are phenomenal for one-offs, and I don't mind stacking them either. They're facing Yusei Kikuchi, who is much better this year than he was last year because he's getting more strikeouts, but he is still letting up a ton of hard contact and a ton of fly balls, and you don't want to do that at Yankee Stadium. The Yankees have a 126 WRC plus against lefties with a 196 ISO. Great stadium for home runs, so I'll be high on the Yankees here. If you want to put them in the top 3 for stacks, you want to put them number 1, I think that's fine. I probably wouldn't put them first, but I could see putting them as high as second. I think they're a very good stack. So the Yankees, to me, quality stacking option and firmly in that same tier as the Brewers and the Angels for tonight. We got pretty good hitting weather in Baltimore for today between the Tigers and the Orioles. I think that opens the door to stacking Baltimore against Michael Lorenzen. Lorenzen pitched decently well last year for the Angels, but he really struggled in his first start this year. He's not a huge strikeout guy, not overly restrictive with batted balls. So he's facing a pretty decent Orioles offense in a good spot for hitting tonight. I think the Orioles are at least worth digging into. So we'll check out the Orioles, but they're behind the Yankees, behind the Brewers, behind the Angels, and definitely behind the Phillies for tonight. Let's finish up with our dinger calls for today. The boring one, it's Hunter Renfroe against a lefty eventually with Ryan Yarbrough. Feel like I got to go with that. I could go extra boring with Mike Trout, but I feel like I used my extra boring ones with Aaron Judge either earlier this week or last week. I used Ohtani this week, so we'll go to like half a rung down and go Hunter Renfroe as the boring home run call. For the fun one, I will go to the Yankees game. Again, Judge is a little bit too boring, but Gleyber Torres, pretty good against lefties too, so this is not like an outlandish home run call, but I'm going to make it anyway. Again, my podcast, my rules. So home run calls for today, Hunter Renfroe, Gleyber Torres, and feel pretty good about both of those for tonight. That is all that we have here for today on the Solo Shot. Again, we are back with you once again next week, Monday through Friday, breaking down the top options across MLB DFS. Make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed to get those right as they're posted. And also check us out over on the FanDuel YouTube page. If you have any questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your MLB DFS lives tonight. Have a fantastic weekend. We'll talk to you once again on Monday. This has been the Solo Shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.